And the paper that it's based on is called a simple single soft finality protocol for Ethereum, but here I did a slightly different name of a fast finalizing ebb and flow protocol. Fast finalizing is kind of self-explanatory. Ebb and flow protocol, I'm going to explain what it is, and this defines the kind of protocol that we're interested in learning. So a little bit of background, first of all, the model that we're working in, or that we want to work in for Ethereum, is the sleepy model of consensus. So this model is a system where participants can be online or offline. We don't assume that honest participants are constantly online. So we have this kind of dynamic participations where people can show up and then leave. And basically, this is meant to work as long as a majority of the online participants are honest. So this probably should remind you of Bitcoin. In fact, this is kind of the original dynamic available protocol that this model was even written for, essentially. Basically, if you think of miners and hash rate, this can fluctuate, and there's no somehow a threshold. It just adjusts. And if half the hash rate goes down, the protocol still continues as long as the majority of it is honest at all times. And for some time, you're going to get slower blocks, but eventually it's going to adjust. And one constraint that we have when we work with the sleepy model, and do not assume that everyone is online, is what's known as the availability finality dilemma. It's an impossibility result that basically says that dynamically available protocols, which are these protocols that tolerate fluctuations, don't tolerate network partitions. So you can basically either tolerate dynamic participation or network partitions. And the reason is essentially just that you cannot distinguish between partitions and participation drops. So it's a quite similar result to the Kraft theorem. So such protocols need to be synchronous. And one way to kind of partially resolve this impossibility result is the definition of this family of ebb and flow protocols that's been done just a few years ago. And what they do is, because of this impossibility result for a single protocol or a single output chain, we instead take a protocol that outputs two different chains. And one of the two is synchronous and dynamically available, and this one is the one that's going to be more live, essentially, that is going to still be live even if we have dynamic participation. And then another chain, another output ledger, which is partially synchronous and is the one that's more safe, essentially. So that's going to have finality. So when we talk about ebb and flow protocols, we usually think of a partially synchronous network with this GST time, which is a global stabilization time where synchrony begins. This is kind of the usual partial synchrony model. But then we also have another such time called a GAT, global awake time, which basically says when participation stabilizes. So participation can be dynamic and fluctuate, but at some point it stops doing so and it stabilizes and everyone is online. So it's kind of similar to GAT in the sense that there's a period where things are bad and then eventually they stabilize. And what we want, given such a network and participation model, is basically dynamic availability. So the available chain, again, we have an available chain and a finalized chain. They're two different output chains. The available chain should be safe and live when we have network synchrony and dynamic participation. So again, it's a synchronous protocol, but it can tolerate fluctuation and participation. Then we should have finality. So this is for the finalized chain. This should be safe. And then once everything is stabilized, like everyone is participating and the network is synchronous, then it should also be live. And then we have two different chains, but we don't want the chains to be completely unrelated. Of course, they should have something to do with each other. And so this is this prefix property, which is the finalized chain should always be a prefix of the available chain. So here in this diagram, you have the blue part, which is the basically safe finalized part. And then this chain tip, which is this available kind of more live thing that can run ahead of the finalized chain for some time. And the general construction that's been put forward for this kind of ebb and flow protocols looks something like this. Like we basically have this like red box, which is the available protocol, and originally this was always on this chain. Again, this is which is the basically consensus protocol of Bitcoin, which is the first dynamic available protocol to be analyzed. So this is just the available chain. Then the output of the available chain is kind of fed into this PBFT protocol, which you can think of as basically a finance gadget that operates on top of it and tries to finalize parts of it. And then the output of this finality gadget, this blue thing, is fed back into the longest chain protocol because we don't want the longest chain protocol to be able to deviate from what's finalized. Like when something is finalized, it really should always be part of the chain. I mean, this respecting checkpoints, like if the PBFT kind of gadget finalizes something, then the available chain is going to respect it, is essentially what gives us, by design, this prefix property. In the Ethereum context, we basically have a construction that looks like this, but with different boxes. So the red box is what we call LMD Ghost, and it's a protocol that's in some sense available, but it's not longest chain, and it does work with voting. So it's not quite as simple as just someone proposes and adds a block to the chain. There's also voting involved, and then the finality gadget is Casper FFG, which is literally called friendly finality gadget, and yeah, it's basically a PBFT type protocol. So in this kind of construction, one key idea is that when we do this feeding of the available chain into the finality gadget, we should only do it for blocks which are confirmed by the underlying available protocol. So if we go back here, you don't actually want to feed everything that is in the longest chain to the finality gadget. For example, if someone adds a new block to the longest chain, this is not safe yet. There's no guarantee that it's not going to be reorged. And usually in Bitcoin, you wait for key confirmations or something like that. You won't wait for a block to be deep enough in the chain. And that's precisely what we want to do. We want to only feed things which are sufficiently safe into the finality gadget. And the reason for doing this is essentially that then we know that the finality gadget does not interfere with the available protocol as long as we have synchrony and the available protocol is by itself safe. So if something is, for example, in the longest chain case, deep enough in the chain, we know that it's not going to be reorged unless there's synchrony problems. And so the finality gadget cannot do anything bad, essentially, cannot end up finalizing something that conflicts with the current chain and cause some reorgs or some weird behavior. And basically then the only thing that we have to worry about is cases when the available chain by itself fails, which would be in a periods of asynchrony, and we have to kind of recover from such periods of asynchrony, and then you can have this interference of the finality gadget. And this is like something that's kind of tricky to handle. So given these definitions, basically what we want for Ethereum eventually is for it to be an available protocol properly defined with all of these dynamic availability, finality, prefix properties. And today it's not quite so. Like I showed this construct that it kind of fits the mold of this construction, but it doesn't quite have the optimal provably secure properties that would basically classify it as such a protocol. We also want it to finalize fast, so we want this finality gadget to quickly basically be able to finalize something that's been proposed recently. And we would, and then we would like it to be simple with like global security and optimal security and other things, but for now, let's just keep it to this. And some of the immediate challenges are that because we want fast finality, but we are operating in this confirmed and finalized paradigm that I mentioned before, we cannot get finality any faster than the confirmation time of the available protocol. So for example, longest chain is not ideal because longest chain means that confirmation is, again, this KD to just wait for something to be deep enough in the chain. And so you have to basically wait for a bunch of blocks to be proposed on top of what we want to confirm and then finalize. So we basically would like a different protocol which confirms fast for the available protocol. And the good thing is that because we are voting, we have a bunch of proof of stake validators voting on every block, then it is possible to get fast confirmation. And then, yeah, generally the interaction between these two components, the available one and the finality gadget, has generally been quite tricky and led to both in practice in Ethereum, but also in actual informal protocols that in the first ebb and flow paper and like follow-up works is generally something that was quite intricate in its definition, and so we'd like to get something simpler. So let's first look at the available component. We wanted to kind of work with what already exists in Ethereum, and so we essentially modified LNP Ghost to try to make it like provably secure, optimally secure, dynamic available protocol. There is this R which is added, RLNP Ghost. I'm not going to explain exactly what that's about, but you can think of it as just a modification of LNP Ghost that's attempting to be dynamic available protocol, properly defined. And so the way it looks in practice is quite similar to the Ethereum protocol today in some sense. There are slots. In every slot, the block is proposed. And after the proposal delta layer, there are votes, which are cast basically by validators saying, this is the thing that I see as the tip of the canonical chain. Then we add two more phases, this fast confirmation phase, which we need for the reasons I already explained, where we basically look at the head votes from the previous phase and then try to, with these, determine whether something is safe already. And then there's this freeze phase, which I'll explain a bit more in detail. And this is essentially what what allows us to improve the security properties of this protocol. And yeah, it really has like a big impact both on safety and liveness. Yeah, I mean, I guess I should say basically the Ethereum protocol today looks very much like just propose, vote, propose. So there aren't these kind of intermediate phases. And these are basically kind of the two main things that we're adding and to reach the goals that we have. So I'll kind of not talk too much about, or I'm not going to talk in detail about fast confirmation at all, but I'm going to talk about this synchronization mechanism, which has to do with this freeze phase. It's called view merge. And the goal here is essentially to ensure that when an honest proposer proposes a block, then they kind of synchronize with the rest of the network, or the rest of the network synchronizes with them, and everyone votes for their block. So the way it works is, so here we have the proposal time, which is the beginning of a slot, and delta before there is this freeze time. What does view freeze mean? It just means that the validator here, as it is pointing to view, which is a bunch of messages, blocks, and things like that, it's gonna freeze its view in the sense that it's gonna stop accepting new messages. It's gonna accept them, but it's gonna buffer them, just not add them to this view, and then later it can add them. And then so just by regular gossiping behavior, everyone is gonna forward things. So you have this view, you're gonna forward all the messages that it's comprised of. And delta later, by network synchrony, the proposer will have gotten this view B for all of those messages. And so we know that the view of the next proposer is going to be basically a superset of the view of this validator. So the proposer is going to have some view B prime, which is a superset of B. Now, the proposer uses this view to decide what to do. Like, it wants to make a block, and he has to decide, okay, I'm running a fortress rule, and I have to figure out what's the head of the chain that I'm going to build this block on. And this fortress rule is essentially just a function of the view. So it's going to depend on V prime. And it creates a block B, it sends it over the network, and it also sends along this view V prime, or some kind of representation of it, succinct representation of it. For example, the hashes of all the votes that it wants to, that it can use in determining this block B. Sends them over, and then the same validator as before at the voting time, so plus delta, it's going to basically take the view given by the proposer and then merge it with its own. So it's going to do this V union V prime. Because of this superset property, it's going to also end up with V prime. So it's basically going to end up agreeing with the proposer on what the view is. And it's going to then apply the same fortress rule as the proposer. So it's going to use this view V prime to determine what the head of the chain is, and it's going to come to the same conclusion as the proposer. which is that basically B or the parent of B is the right thing, is the head of the canonical chain. And because of that, it's going to vote for B. It's going to essentially agree with the proposer, okay, you did the right thing. This was in fact the block that you're supposed to build on. I'm going to give you my vote. And this goes for all of the honest validators. And so we basically get this property that if a proposer is honest, it follows this protocol. Their proposal is voted by all the honest validators. What this then gives us, I mean, this is not obvious, but looking at the way the workers rule works, is that an honest proposal enters the canonical chain and never leaves it, like it's never reorged. So basically what this looks like is something like this, like we might have a chain that's perfectly fine, but then a bunch of adversarial slots, these red slots, come along, and the adversaries kind of confuse things, create a chain split, maybe by publishing blocks at weird times, and things like that. So the honest, these green votes, the honest votes are split, so there's this kind of confusion going on. But as soon as an honest proposal comes up, even with all this confusion happening in the chain before, everyone kind of agreed that, oh, actually, it's not the bottom chain that should have been built on, it's the top chain, because of this view merging mechanism. And so everyone temporarily agrees with the proposer and votes for the block. And now, because the honest voters are a majority, or at least the majority of the online participants, which is this dynamically available kind of assumption, then this block is never going to be reorged. Like the fact that this block came up and everyone honest voted for it, stabilizes the chain essentially, and so it kind of eliminates these splits. And then sure, there might be splits later, again here, but meanwhile this block is always going to stay. And we call this property reorg resilience. So an honest proposal is not reorged ever, and it's basically the foundation of all the good properties that then this protocol ends up having. And so yeah, given we want to then add finality to it with still some kind of finality budget, and we end up using just Casper FFG because that's what we use now, and there's not really, I mean, essentially any kind of BBFT protocol could do the job here. And this is what the final protocol ends up looking like. It's the same slot structure as before with 4 deltas, but with some additions to what happens here and what happens here. So we still have proposal phase, then these head votes, so where you really say just what is the tip of the canonical chain. Now actually today in Ethereum, in this phase there's more that happens. It's not just saying what the head of the canonical chain is, it's also voting for basically the finality gadget. So what's here called an FFG vote, where you say this is the thing that I would like to justify. Justification is basically the first round of the PBFT voting basically. And so it's basically part of the process of finalizing. Today in Ethereum, it's all bundled here in a single vote, whereas here it would be separate. Then the second part, it's still this fast confirmation phase, but you also cast this basically first finality vote, essentially this vote to justify something, or FFG vote. Then there's still this view merge and freezing phase, and what we call acknowledgements. It's basically the second vote that has to do with finalizing. Like you can think of this as just the first round of PBFT, and this is the second round of PBFT. We call it acknowledgements for reasons that I think are basically better not explained here. But yeah, basically the whole kind of pipeline of a slot is supposed to be that the proposal is gossiped, then everyone votes for it in the optimistic case. During this phase, these votes are gossiped. At this point, everyone has received all the votes. It confirms, everyone confirms, fast confirms such a proposal. Then everyone casts an FFG vote to justify the proposal. These votes are gossiped. By this point, everyone has received them. They freeze their view, but at this point, they've already received all the votes. Everyone agrees that, okay, this proposal is justified. And then they cast votes, these acknowledgements, which are basically saying, I know that this thing is justified, And basically these votes altogether act as the finality certificate. And so by being the next slot, the proposal is finalized. And this is an optimistic case, but also because of this dual merge property and what I mentioned before, basically this would also be the way that an honest lock works under synchrony list. So yeah, basically this is comparing the protocol as it was before, propose, vote, fast confirm, freeze, to this one. And as you can see, it's just we add FFG voting here. The first round of basically the finality gadget happens at the same time as fast confirmation, and then this second round happens here. Yeah, here, I mean, the crucial thing is you only cast an FFG vote for something if it's fast confirmed. So immediately, you have this fast confirmation phase. If something is fast confirmed, you can immediately already cast an FFG vote for it and basically put it into the finality gadget pipeline, essentially. So here is essentially where the feeding into the EPFT box that we had before happens, and it's gated by fast confirmation. So it's only going to be fed in the FFG box if it's fast confirmed, or at least the honest people will only do so. And so, as long as you have at least 1/3 of honest people, then nothing is ever going to be finalized if it's not fast confirmed in advance. And just the phase of change. And yeah, as far as the admin flow properties, so we always, as I said now, confirm a block before attempting to finalize it. We have this fast confirmation mechanism, and so we're basically adhering to this kind of overall rule that I mentioned that a lot of these constructions, or all of these constructions, I think, as far as I know, use. And this basically gives us that the finality gadget after FFG does not interfere with RLMD Ghost under permanent network synchrony. So in the conditions where RLMD Ghost by itself would work, it also works here. So it is a safe and live dynamic available protocol, because adding Casper FFG on top of it doesn't actually change anything. So basically, running this protocol on the top or running this protocol on the bottom doesn't actually change anything when we have good conditions for the protocol on the top to work. So we've added some extra votes, but these votes don't do anything when the fast confirmation outcome is always safe. And so yeah, basically this means just that once we have shown that RLMD Ghost is a dynamic available protocol by itself, then it's still going to be an available protocol once we add the finality gadget on top. So we've satisfied this dynamic availability problem. And of course, I didn't argue too precisely why RLMD Ghost isn't a dynamic available protocol, but basically it all falls from real resilience. The fact that we have real resilience under dynamic participation. This is what gives us kind of all of the good properties for RLMD Ghost. Then yeah, because we have RLMD Ghost supporting fast confirmations, and we can immediately confirm something that was just proposed, and we can immediately cast a vote to justify it, so we can immediately feed it into the finality gadget. You can immediately justify and finalize a proposed block within the slot in which it's proposed. So it's kind of as good of a speed to finality as we can get. Basically, immediately proposal, confirmation, justification, finalization. Yeah, because of the synchronization that we have to due to demerge, when a block is proposed by an honest leader, an honest proposer, it is immediately fast confirmed, justified, and finalized. So before I said this pipeline on the bottom is kind of the optimistic one, but because of demerge, we can quite easily show that it is exactly what happens when a proposer is honest. So this optimistic pipeline is actually just the honest pipeline, like the honest proposer pipeline. And so this immediately gives us liveness in the finalized chain. Like as soon as an honest proposer shows up, their proposer in particular gets fast confirmed, justified, and finalized. Of course, when we have network synchrony and when everyone is online. Like we still have to reach the 2/3 threshold of voting in order to justify and finalize something. So this can only, of course, happen when after this GAT global wait time. and of course now we have seen.
Francesco, sorry to interrupt you. We're slowly running out of time. Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Oh, great.
So thanks everyone. And I mean, I don't know if you have. I guess it's already 11, so we don't have questions. But yeah, as I said before, thanks for inviting me, and I'll reach out to me on Twitter or whatever if you have any questions.
Cool. Thank you very much. Warm round of applause for our speaker.